Hello, the program is the Dailies, where we look at some of the news and current affairs stories that are dropping from our paper this morning. I am Sada Elisha Dasho, and I'll be doing the program with Rachel Tansey. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Sally.
All right, and to our viewers at home, do remember you can join us live on Facebook and on YouTube, and then you can also drop your views on any of the story that is of interest to you. And then later on the show, we will open the phone line so you can also be actively involved in what is happening here in the studio. And we will go straight into the paper, starting with the first newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Ijaw U.S. group extols Dixon, says he remains pan-Ijaw leader as High Chief Jeremiah declares plot to smear him as dead on arrival. The big story on the paper, Native report, reps issue arrest warrant on Kyari Cardoso, accountant general, and 17 others for shunning 4 earlier invitations, order IGP to bring affected CEOs before committee December 14. And on 2027 polls, 25 new political parties apply to INEC for registration. Army drone strike in Kaduna, deeply regrettable, coming from the president. Reps vow to recover national assets acquired through fraud. Comment on Tinubu, Apapa-led Labour Party faction tackles Peter Obi. Army Chief Labaja attends burial of Army drone strike victims. Still on First News newspaper, Tinubu returns to Abuja from COP28 in Dubai. I lost 34 family members to Kaduna bombing. This is from a resident, and this is very sad. All you need to know about UK new visa rules for those planning to apply, to get the First News newspaper and find the details inside. Supreme Court fines Ezekome 40 million naira for filing frivolous suit seeking Uzodima's sack, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
And let's take a look at the Metrics newspaper. And the first story there we'll be starting with is a big story where we have Kaduna killing defense headquarters steer fresh controversy at outrage resound, with the writer following that story says the NEF demands COAS CDS military top brass resignation. Still on the Metrics, another writer here said the COAS apologizes as Tinubu orders probe of incident. Atiku, Obi, and others mourn, offer condolences. Detail of that story can be found on page 2. Also still on the paper, dormant oil license owners to forfeit. This is coming from the federal government. Sheitima support non-kinetic approach to insecurity in the southeast. CBN Governor, Accountant General, and others in a fresh trouble. Reps issue warrant arrest over failure to respond to invitation, and you can do well to find more detail of the reason why they have refused and why the reps is actually calling for arrest of all of these CEOs of these various sectors. Still on the Metrics newspaper, NAF put up presidential aircraft for sale, calls for bidders. Falcon obtained 19.41 billion naira for 15,000 metric ton LPG storage facility in Rivers. Supreme Court orders son Mike Oziome to pay 40 million naira fine over Imo 2019 election. Tinubu returns to Abuja after attending COP28 summit, detail found inside the paper. Minister reveals reasons for poor network. You can find more of the story inside the paper. And we have a picture story here addressing insecurity in the southeast of Nigeria, where we can see the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives and also presenting a peace emblem to the Vice President Sheitima while he led a delegation under the Peace in Southeast project on a courtesy visit to the presidential villa yesterday. And that's all on the Metrics newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Lagos to open Opebi Mende Ojota link bridge in the second quarter of 2024. $852 million operators debt, Senate issues 48-hour ultimatum to NPA. Federal government seeks $1.5 billion funding to lay 95,000 kilometer fiber optic cables. You can find details on page 3. The big story on the paper, foreign investment, IOC's indigenous companies decry multiple taxation bottlenecks in petroleum industry. Load NCDMB for effective local content implementation. Minister identifies divestment by foreign companies as opportunity for developing in-country capacity. And I just hope that the federal government put things in place that will make it easy for developing in-country capacity and then for companies within the country to be able to dive into the petroleum sector. You can find more details on page 2. Customs intercept 18,100 liters PMS 9-trailer loads of foreign rice, orders worth 872 million naira. Wapute harps on prioritizing local content as national agenda to sustain growth. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
Alright, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Leadership newspaper, where we have ASU lament exodus of lecturers from public varsity. You can find more detail of that story on page 7. Federal government to prosecute gender-based violence in school as well. Detail of that found on page 7.2 of the Leadership newspaper. And on what's trending on the paper, police arrest 2 for starving relative to death. And then on the numbers, we're having small and medium enterprises spend $14 million yearly on diesel. This is a report. You can find detail of both stories on page 2. Still, we have on budget comment, presidency accuses Peter of post-election trauma. And on the Kaduna bombing, Tinubu, northern governors and others demand probe. Military apologizes, say terrorists disguised as civilians to invade attackers, to evade attack. Military apologizes, say terrorists disguised as civilians to evade attacks. Request notice of public gatherings from residents. You can find detail of that story on page 4. And still on the issue of Fox Petroleum, offer $2.5 billion annual investment for Nigeria. And we have Israeli forces to kill scores of Palestinians in southern Gaza. You can find detail of that on page 4. And we're having a picture story here. One is that of the burial, the mass burial of those who died. And then we're having some of the victims in the hospital, mostly basically children, receiving checkup in the hospital after that, attack that took place over there. You can do well to grab the Leadership and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, Makinde presents 432.2 billion naira budget, prioritizes education and health. Umba presents 521 billion naira budget, education gets 33%. Renewed hope agenda, my priority in police affairs ministry, coming from Suleiman Ibrahim. You can find more details on page 13. The big story on the paper, and we have starting from a statement from a survivor that says, I lost 34 relatives. I know of a man who lost all his 12 children, including his wife. We are picking body parts and putting them in bako bags. And we already have pictures showing Idris Haruna, the one who lost 34 family members, and then Amos, a survivor, and then we have Hajia Aisha, another survivor. Now, the big story on Nigerian Tribune, survivors recount details of Kaduna tragic drone attack. Tinubu, ACF, NEF, JNI call for probe. Labaja visits village, regrets incident. How unwanted tragedy occurred, coming from the defense headquarters. 85 killed, 66 injured. This is a report from NEMA. You can find details on page 4. Customs seized 9 trailer loads of rice and others in Ogun State. Supreme Court finds Ozekome 40 million naira, declines application to sack Uzodinma. Air Force puts up presidential aircraft for sale. You can find details on page 5, and we have picture stories showing the ongoing construction of the Apebi Ojota link in Lagos, inspected by Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu. This happened yesterday. We can see this is a contract by Julius Berger, and then we can see all the committees on the work from the Lagos State House of Assembly with Honorable Desmond Elliott during this inspection that took place yesterday in Lagos. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Vanguard newspaper, budget, Defense Senate wants MDAs against sabotaging the 2024 budget cycle. You can find detail of that on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper. Still on the issue of Kaduna airstrike, we are having defense headquarters apologizes, insist. Okay, I still take that story. Sorry for the. And then still talking about Kaduna airstrike, defense headquarters apologizes, insists terrorists were killed. And then Tinubu returns from COP28 summit in Dubai. Federal government won't weaponize region, ethnicity, SGF tells Sultan Khan and others with detail found on page 13. And on the 2024 budget, Tinubu Sheitima aids to spend 15.961 billion naira on trips, where we're having the rider here, Vida mechanical electrical maintenance will actually go up 9 billion naira. Vehicles they were going to be spending 6 billion naira. Foodstuff, catering, material supplies 602 million naira. State House miscellaneous 2.54 billion naira. Villa computers and repairs 980 million naira. And then Villa Holinarium, you're going to spend in 365.8 million naira. And quite a lot of, I believe that Nigerians are really ready with their fingers tied, Rachel, to actually scrutinize all of these. I mean, looking at about 15.961 billion naira is actually going to be spent on trips. Then we begin to ask that if we're really serious in this country about cutting down cost of governance. Here we're seeing a lot of people are calling for merging of some of the MDAs because it seems as if some of these ministries are having dual purposes. And no wonder that is where people fall to the number of delegates that were sent to Dubai, because some of these ministries can actually be merged together, not necessarily having a lot of people. But of course, I know the presidents will definitely have a response concerning that. But then looking at some of the money that will be spent talking about electrical maintenance, vehicle, full stuff, holinarium, and the likes of it. I mean, to some extent, why don't we cut down some of this thing? I mean, some of the spendings are too much. And no wonder ASU is even saying they do not believe that the federal government will not have money to fund education, because you remember we were looking at whether grant or loan for students. And a lot of people are saying, I mean, government do not have the money to give grants to students. Rather, they will give loans. But this is not the first time we had the issue of loan. There were times that loans were given and then some of the students did not pay and nothing was being done to them. So when you see things like this happening, we need to block certain leakages in our spendings in the country as it is present, if only we are ready to actually do it. But from some of the spendings and some of the breakdown here, Rachel, you cannot help but wonder if really we are serious to cut down our spending and give certain sectors the money that they need. I'm excited where I'm seeing that the governor of Enugu have allocated 33% to education. That is commendable, and this is supposed to be how it should be done. That for a whole budget, about 30 to 33% should go to education, because that is what is needed. But we're seeing that certain other sectors that are not really relevant are actually taking more money than even education and health that's supposed to be given top priority.
Sally, what baffles me the most is the confidence in this kind of expenditure. I mean, okay, food stuff is okay, but what is catering materials and supplies? Do you keep buying them yearly? Because these are things that are not supposed to spoil. These are things that have 10 years warrant. Are you trying to tell me that the past administration went with all the caterings supply in the ASO Villa, or what? Why is this? These are the recurrent expenditures that we are not supposed to see. That whether we like it or not, it looks fraudulent in a lot of ways, because somebody is going to pocket this money. Because I want to believe that the Asofila is not lacking in catering materials and supplies, because these are things that when you buy them, they are there for a very long period of time. It's not even supposed to come into a yearly budget. It's not even supposed to come into the budget 4 years later, perhaps 10 years later, and then, okay, yes, there are new things that needs to be upgraded, and then we upgrade them. But we're seeing this for 2024 budget, and then you wonder, do we just use them after a year and go and throw them in the dustbin, or because it's a new administration we keep changing them and throwing them away and just wasting money? And then you see something like Villa computers. Are we buying new computers or what? You keep wondering, why are these things confidently on the expenditure list? Because it's surprising for me. I see wastage on every level, and for some reason it feels like it's okay for us to put something like that as our recurrent expenditure. And then it's really sad, because this shouldn't even be in the first place. And we'll never stop overemphasizing the fact that when you see what needs to be funded not getting the funds that it needs, and when you see the things that are not even supposed to be funded in the first place getting billions of naira, it worries us, Sele. It is disturbing, because you will see the health sector lacking, you will see agriculture lacking, you're seeing the education lacking, but for some reason catering supplies are not lacking. I mean, computers repairs are not lacking, and yet we are having many uneducated people out there, and yet you are spending hundreds of millions to repair computers that it means, at first perhaps you didn't buy a good ones. Why are they getting this chunk of money to repair computers that we're supposed to have high quality ones in the first place that shouldn't even have problems after a long period of time? The more we see this, the more we know the kind of government we're still having. We know we know that we are still having administrations that don't care concerning expenditure, that they will be lavish regardless of whatever committee or whatever body or organization is calling their attention to certain expenditures. However, Sele, I would like to deviate a little bit from the 2024 budget, because the more I listen to our military or whatever statement coming from the defense headquarters concerning the bombing in Kaduna State, I am angry. That is the word for it. I don't know how to sugarcoat my feeling concerning it, because you can't kill 80 terrorists, 80 civilians just to get 5 terrorists. It's unheard of, Sele. It's not done anywhere. The moment you target a certain location, that okay, there are criminals in this location, the moment for some reason that location gets mixed with civilians, you're supposed to abort that mission. You can't bomb over 80 people and you're seeing people losing their entire family, and yet you're coming out to give excuses that terrorists mixed up with civilians. You call off the operation. It means it has to be on a halt until you're sure you have these terrorists in a secluded area where it is just them, before you carry on with this attack. And for the military to come out and be saying something like this, making it look like it's a good enough excuse or a reason, and to just say sorry and think that is enough, I just hope this doesn't stop here. I hope this probe doesn't stop. Somebody have to lose their job. This is not one of those things that we will take lightly or just be calm about it or be cool about it. No, we can't chill concerning this. An apology is not enough. Whoever is the person that authorized that attack should answer to whatever it is. Whoever is the person that allowed this attack to go on, whatever is your position, you are supposed to answer for it, because it shows we are not intelligent. It shows that we do not know how to operate as the army. It shows that we are just out to, it shows our incompetence on a very high level. You can't kill over 80 people just to get 5 or 10 people. It's not done anywhere. 70 people can't just lose their life just for some few terrorists that you're not even sure if it is true 100% that they are mixed. You are assuming and speculating, because if you were sure, then you would have waited for these people that you know you have identified them very well to be where you can only target them and leave these civilians. So for me, I'm not happy whatsoever concerning this outcome. And I just hope that people who are in charge, who authorized this attack, should be called to book, and they should answer. They should face whatever penalty that they should for something like this, because it's not acceptable anywhere. This is incompetent. This shows that, you know what, it even shows that our army don't know what they're doing, because that drone shouldn't even fire in the first place the moment you notice that these terrorists have mixed with civilians. It should have been cancelled, aborted, and then you leave that mission for another day when you are sure that these terrorists are without civilians.
You know, Richard, listening to our army apologizing and insisting that terrorists were killed, it's just like you rightly say, it's unheard of that a lot of people will have to lose their life. Why? Because we're trying to get just a few number, not even up to 10 people. And even if it's just a person that lost his life is actually very painful.
It is.
Not to talk about over 80 people. We're talking about 85 people. In fact, we're having some of the survivors saying they're still picking body parts.
Yes.
Rachel, that is the sad reality of all of this. I can't help but imagine. I remember during the time, I think, was it when Erufai was the governor, and he said he was seeking for permission to bomb a forest. And he was like, we just have to permit that bombing because a lot of civilians will lose their life, but then this should be counted as part of the damage or something like that.
Yes, collateral damage.
You can imagine a collateral damage for a lot of people. And then he was really, people came to him and like, it's not done. You can't just destroy entire community because we are sure of that. And that didn't happen eventually. But then to some extent, you cannot help Nigerians to imagine. And you remember I said it ever since we read about this bombing. And then I'm asking the question, are you just trying to wipe the whole community? Because talking about 85 people is a lot of people. And just like we're saying, the army needs to come out beyond saying we are sorry. What is paining me, this is not the first time we're having such carelessness happening. Even though it's not just the army, we're also having issues where even the Air Force have actually done such carelessness before, and then it's just like sorry, and then life goes on. But then life does not go on for these people living in that community. We're talking about post trauma for them eventually. So we just hope, Rachel, that we'll do the right thing in this country, because it's high time we stop all of this sorry. Nigerians want you to prevent certain things, and not just when it has happened you begin to look for how to correct it. I think it's high time we go to that level in this country. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, federal government deficit spending rises to 11% to 7.88 trillion naira, defies 75% increase in revenue. You can find detail of that on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. And coming from IPOP, we must adopt non-kinetic approach to end insecurity in the Southeast, coming from the Vice President concerning the operation of the IPOP over there. NYC 7, don't let our children die in kidnappers' den. Parents beg the government. Remember those Akwa Ibom corps members that were being, kidnapped on their way to camp. And here parents are calling on the federal government to please come to the aid of the children by not allowing them to die in the den of these kidnappers. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, we are having a column for sport, and then also another one coming for Efe Babalola, and then that you can find on page 22. We have Governor Imba presenting his budget to the State House of Assembly yesterday, and then we're having another picture of the Kaduna bombing victims, where we can see some of the victims over there receiving checkup in the hospital, and that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
Sarah, you might help me take the Daily Independent newspaper.
All right, on the Daily Independent, we have mass resignation hit public universities as to cry out. You can find detail of that story, and not just are we having the issue of I think we saw that yesterday, Rachel, where we are seeing that a lot of doctors are living in Kanu, nurses, and then also outpatients are being discharged because we don't have a lot of doctors. And here we're seeing mass resignation hit public varsity as to cries out. Well, we hope our government will do something to make sure that we don't lose our teachers and our lecturers. Senate to withhold budgetary approval to government agency. You can find more of that on page 4. And the big story, Nigerian Airlines laments $60 million loss to bird strike annually. You can find carriers suffer 60 bird strikes in 10 months in 2023. Ask the federal government to reduce costs of bird damages with modern tech. You can find more of that story inside the paper. NASU mount pressure on Tinubu to review minimum wage, says it's ridiculous earning 30,000 naira and buying fuel at 640 naira per litre. Detail of that can be found on page 7. Supreme Court dismisses Adeyoha suit seeking to sack Ozodinma. You can find more detail of that story on page 6. Federal government states borrowing 11 trillion pension fund at low interest rate. Detail of the story can be found on page 7. This is a statement coming from Oshomole. Reps summon DSS, NCOS, EFCC over attempt to re-arrest Emifele. Federal government okay sale of presidential aircraft as Air Force calls for bidders. You can find detail of that on page 6. Tinubu orders investigation after army airstrike kills over 85. with the writer here saying, Army chief visit bomb village, apologizes and donate 10 million naira. Federal government to compensate Kaduna airstrike victims. And then we have, I lost 34 family members to Kaduna bombing coming from a villager. Governor Imba presents 521.6 billion naira 2024 budget to State Assembly. Detail of that can be found on page 27. We have a picture story on the front page of the paper. You can do well to grab the Daily Independent and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you. But before we move further with other paper analysis, we would love to take a break at this moment. Quite a lot of story for you to chew, to actually digest. And when we come back, we'll open the phone lines and hear what your own views are concerning any of the story that is of interest to you. Please stay tuned with us. Welcome back. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the front page where we have seen that Governor of Oyo State, Governor of Enugu have submitted their budget for 2024. Also, we're seeing that the army is still apologizing concerning the bombing of those victims in Kaduna, and they are insisting that terrorists were part of those people. So we'd love to hear what your own views are concerning any of the story. Please do remember that you should reduce the volume of your TV set. The number to call is displayed on your screen at this moment, and then try to be audible so that we can hear you clearly and other viewers at home can also hear you clearly. Now let's take a look at the next paper before the calls come in. On Daily Sun newspaper, on 2019, Imo Guba Supreme Court dismisses Adeyoha's suit to sack Ozodinma. Slam 40 million naira fine for filing frivolous motion. You can find more detail of that on page 6. Tears as victims of Kaduna bombing get mass burial, with the writer Tinubu orders investigation. Atiku, Islamic group and others mourn in 6 on probe. Army chief visit village.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we have a call.
Good
Hello.
morning to you people, Tele and you.
Yeah, morning, sir.
You see, this thing happened in Ukraine. It happened in Israel. In fact, the Nigerian army are very, very kind and naive. We even apologize to those crises and bombing in Kaduna State. You understand? It's supposed to be like that. When Israel is not apologizing, Russia is not apologizing. It happened. They use civilian as the shield. You understand? They say talking is cheap. You are just analyzing this in your studio like as if, heaven wants to fall on hell. You understand? It's supposed to be like that. Now, next time, when these people see that such people are in their midst, they should make move to report them, and then so they can fish them out to the military. Thank you.
All right. I wish you could just stay on the line.
Yes,
I wanted to get
on the line, yeah.
I really wanted to, I didn't get the name of the caller who called.
The person didn't say
but
their
then,
name.
you're entitled to your opinion concerning the issue that happened in Kaduna. But I believe that it's not about us staying back in the studio and just analyzing things, but we're trying to actually have empathy to what is happening in Kaduna, Rachel. I mean, you can't tell me that over 80 people, it happened in Israel, every country with what works for them. And if
Exactly.
it works for Israel, that doesn't mean it works for us here
I
in
mean, Stella,
Nigeria.
this is a very unique case that you can't
Mm.
compare to Russia-Ukraine war.
And the
Neither can you
rest.
compare it to the Hamas and then the
Israel,
Israel-Hamas
yeah.
war. These are three different scenarios.
Mm.
When these countries are striking, they know for sure the people they are going after. We have our military speculating. They are not sure whether they kill terrorists or not. They are just giving excuses because
Why?
who are those terrorists you were targeting in the first place? You didn't make mention of that. Yesterday is today you're coming out with a defense that some terrorists, you're not even 100% sure of the information. And even if, who are those terrorists you were trying to target in the first place? Is it Boko Haram? Is it Hertzman? Or is it the unknown gunmen that you keep saying are unknown? Who were the people that you were targeting? And we can sit down and say it is acceptable. Even when it comes to the Ukraine war, there's a lot of complaint, be it the war in Hamas and Israel concerning targeting civilians. If it happens, doesn't mean it's right. And we can sit down and accept it and say it's okay for civilians to lose their lives because terrorists merged into them, and even the military are not for sure if they got those terrorists that they want to. What are their profile? Why are we not having the details? How as
I mean, by now we should have the
we
pictures
should
on
of
our
the
papers.
terrorists you were trying to get and all of that, and if you truly did, and then do these villagers have access to the military to report and say we have these terrorists amidst
Are they
us?
even aware?
Are they even aware? These are all the things that we need to look and put in place. So we are trying to condemn certain things from it not happening again, not because we are saying it's okay for terrorists to merge with civilians, but it is not acceptable for these numbers of civilians to lose their lives because of terrorists. And then it is not acceptable because the aim is, why are the army out there? Is to protect the terrorists from civilians. So then if that
So
is
the
the aim,
civilians from the terrorists.
exactly, to yeah, exactly, Sele, to protect civilians from terrorists. And then if reverse is the case, then where are we heading towards? It's unheard of, and it shouldn't be acceptable regardless of what is going on in other war-torn zones. It's not acceptable,
Of course,
Sele.
because the fact that it happened in other places doesn't make it right
It doesn't make it
whatsoever.
right either.
And I believe that for a caller, you could just try to put yourself in their shoe. I mean, if your family member was part of those people that died, I don't believe you will make such a comment. So I really feel that at a time like this, the people of Kaduna, that community, need our empathy. They really need support of Nigeria at a time like this. So thank you so much for your own view on that story. Still on Daily Sun newspaper, we are having Abuja communities hold solidarity rally, where we are having for Kano, Zamfara, and Plateau and others talking about the judgment of the appeal court. We're having Abuja community holding solidarity rally for Kano, Zamfara, and Plateau others. Coming from the IPPG, oil and gas service providers exiting Nigeria in troops. That is the sad one. You can find more on page 2. NLC seek new minimum wage commensurate with the cost of living, which they say the federal government should look into that for the second quarter. Nigeria political scene forest of chaos. This is coming from Bishop Kuka. Court dismisses forgery case against Abga Chief Tai Doze. You can find that on page 27. CBN to sanction bank holding cash insists 2.99 trillion naira in circulation. You can find more of that on page 25. Khan Sultan caution against dangerous immigration, urge Nigerians to avoid relocation plan, exposing them to danger and inhumane treatment. Imba presents 521.6 billion naira budget, restate commitment to rapid development of Enugu. You can find that on page 6. We're still having the mass burial over there on the front page of the paper, and that's all on the Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, CBN blames cash crunch on uneven flow and huge withdrawals. Japa syndrome Nigerian kills wife in UK over bills. And we have on education, education gets 20%, 20.08% of marking days, 434 billion naira budget. We have sounds coordination kicks off with 150 million naira empowerment scheme. The big story on the paper, Army explains accidental drone attack on villagers. We have a statement from the defense headquarters saying intelligence showed terrorist movement. Our family lost 34 people. NEMA 85 killed, 66 injured. Tinubu sympathizes, others probe of incident. And also the mass case, Supreme Court slams 40 million naira cost on Ozekube. You can find details on page 4. And at the downside of the paper, budget 2024, federal government target concessionary loans, climate financing. More details can be found on page 7. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Voice of Liberty, still on the issue of Kaduna, Army claim responsibility for the airstrike. Detail of that can be found in the paper. And on COP28, federal government should publish number of government-sponsored delegates. This is coming from Labour Party Tanko. You can find more in the paper. Federal government resumed trial of suspended Boko Haram members, with detail of the story found in the paper. And on 2024 budget, your contribution must go beyond criticism, Abbas tells Nigerians. Following President Bola Tinubu's submission of a proposed 2024 budget of 27.5 trillion naira to the National Assembly and the House of Rep, Speaker Abbas has called on Nigerians to contribute more substantively to the nation building instead of the criticism of government. You can find detail in the paper. Erufai announces withdrawal from active politics, return to private sector. Nigeria faces relentless Boko Haram ISIS attack. This is a report coming from the U.S. Indi Igbo may support Tinubu in 2027 if Nnamdi Kanu is released. This is coming from Ohanizi. And I hope they are not saying this just because of the Southeast, Rachel. But this should be, do they really think he's competent enough to come back? Because it looks more like give me, I give you kind of scenario here. If you release Nnamdi Kanu, and then we will give you the support you need in 2027. Rather, it should be based on his competence, his track record. It should be based on, we have seen that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is capable of going for a second term, not because he released one of you. So I believe that should be the bone of contention here. Still, we have federal government only sponsored 422 people to COP28. This is coming from Information Minister. We had it yesterday and it's still coming on our paper today as well. And that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On the Punch newspaper, auction presidential aircraft bidders get December 24th deadline. Federal government seeks 35 billion naira to revive Ajakuta Steel. Power Finance Ministries get 618 billion naira loan, CSOs kick. The big story on the paper, Kaduna village bombing, death toll hits 120 villagers, alleged military bombed twice. One family loses 32 members, culprits must be punished, survivors, ACF, JNI tells military. Army chief begs victims, says soldiers mistook villagers for bandits. Still on the Punch newspaper, cabal running Akeredolo's government, stealing funds coming from the PDP. Truck crushes woman amid Lagos police Okada riders clash. Over 9,000 civil servants fail promotion exams, and that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
Let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper. States grown in debt, poor funding despite 16 trillion naira on the FAAC windfall. And we have a breakdown of some of the allocation, where we're having that total fact share by states in the last 4 years is about 15.58 trillion naira. And then state IGR is about 40% of the FEC allocation. Now, FEC allocation by geopolitical zone from 2020 to 2021. The Northwest is having about 1.56 trillion naira, and then the Northeast is having 1 trillion naira, and then the Southwest 1.28 trillion naira, South 2.59 trillion naira, Southeast 963 billion naira, and then North Central is having 1.26 trillion naira. Now, we are seeing here that in the first half of 2023, 1.15 trillion naira was disbursed to sub-national entities for July, August, September, and October, and then states received from FEC in 2020 to 2021 by their combined IGR stood at 3.46 trillion naira, or less than the 40% of their FEC allocation. Now, 12% of the world population in extreme poverty live in Nigeria. Now, question will be, despite this funding, here we're seeing that 12% of the world, what will I say, world population of extreme poverty is actually in Nigeria, Rachel. So now, just take what the states are going through and then compare with what we are having for I think the other story we saw concerning vehicle maintenance, catering,
catering
and all
supplies.
of that, the money that will go into that. And then here we're seeing that despite the allocation that the government is giving to states for, I think, every month or so, every quarter, we're still seeing here that, well, the states are still, in fact, we saw when Sarah said World Bank should stop giving our governors
Yes.
fund because they are spending it recklessly. So you wonder, when you're living comfortably and yet your state is still lavishing in poverty, what are you doing? And these are questions that Nigerians are supposed to ask their leaders.
Yes.
I think should be one of the things that our speaker is saying. Not about criticizing our government, but then we should hold them accountable. We should
have
ask
to.
them sensible questions. This money, you're actually saying this. What have you done with this money? And I think when we begin to hold our leaders accountable in that way, they'll be very careful every time they spend. I mean, when you go to other countries, you see that even for the president, there are certain things that you remove from your own personal pockets. It's not from the state house that you actually carry taxpayers' money to actually fund some of your reckless and wasteful spending. If you want to actually live a very large and flamboyant life, then you should be ready to take it out of your pocket. Maybe if we start doing that, we begin to see some of our leaders being very, very conscious of every dime. But when everything is being funded for them, you're traveling, you're feeding, and everything, virtually you don't even spend your allowances and your salary for anything eventually, because everything is being done for you. So it's quite sad when we're looking at, despite all of this, some of our states are still living in extreme poverty. That is what is looking here. So we're looking for to see more steps and how we'll be able to fight this poverty in these various states.
I mean, Sele, the speaker can only talk about that, but I mean, every administration has been criticized, and his will not be void of criticism. There will be constructive criticism. There will be criticisms coming from the places of hate, but then there will still be constructive criticism that is coming from the place of good analysis, and of course seeing the gap and where the government is missing out, and then it's left for the government to know what criticism to take, work with, and then
which
do
to drop.
the will of the people exactly, and then come to the aid of Nigerians. Because yes, we can't sit down and say misappropriation of funds left, right, center, and then not talk about it, because you are supposed to be accountable. It is not your money. You have to be accountable with what you do with Nigerians' money. You have to tell us precisely what you're going to do. And when you do things that doesn't sit well with Nigerians, we will talk about it. But then it's left for you to adapt. I mean, put a deaf ear to the situation or listen eventually. So far, so good. All we are getting from our administrations, from our government, is a deaf ear to our cry. But we just hope that eventually we'll keep pushing, and they will also listen to us, because you know what? This debt is not going to go low so far. We are also seeing places like the South getting over 2.59 trillion naira. However, we are still seeing these places underdeveloped. It means money has been misused. There has been misappropriation of fundings, because if the South is getting this much, then, and yet we are still seeing the things and the problem going on there, then it says someone is not sleeping, however, getting this amount of money for a period of time that a good visible development could have taken place in this area, and then nothing to show for. So it shows that, you know what, there have been a lot of money being pumped into Nigeria, into our system, that if only people were to diligently do their job, we would have seen some significant amount of growth. However, it looks like we're in a stagnant position, because our leaders feel we shouldn't hold them responsible or accountable. They feel we do not have the right to speak about what they decide to do with the funds of this country, whereas it shouldn't be like that. So yes, Nigerians will talk until you listen, and eventually until we have leaders that are willing to be selfless. But till then, I mean, we will keep seeing this back and forth going on our paper.
We'll talk about it. You're a public figure, so you're a public you'll be used the way Nigerians feel to be used because you're a public figure. Well, let's look at other stories still on the Guardian newspaper. Local content stagnant at 54% amid $25 billion oil investment and divestment. Detail of that found on page 5. Senate chase MPA custom over $1.68 billion revenue loss. Also, Makinde present 434.2 billion naira 2024 budget to the Assembly. The Gambia returned 9 euro bonds Stoneway to Lagos, and then Kaduna bumping. Army chief apologizes as victims get mass burial. And on COP28, Nigerian reaps windfall in $1 million African focus pledges. We hope that whatever Nigeria have actually gotten out of that, they will use it to the best and development of the country. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, the big story: NGF, JNI, ACF, NEF demand investigation, justice, and compensation. Army's mistake remark not acceptable, coming from a group terrorists embedded with civilians who will guard against reoccurrence, coming from the defense headquarters. You can find details on page 6. 2019 Imo governorship poll: Supreme Court slams 40 million naira fine on Ozekome. Senate gives NPA 48 hours to produce unaccounted $1.8 billion. At the downside of the paper, we have Spain, India, Netherlands top Nigeria's export destination in the third quarter of 2023. Governors biggest beneficiaries of fuel subsidy removal. Tinubu returns to Abuja after attending COP28 in Dubai. Fourth quarterly NIREC meeting: pray for leaders. A statement coming from the Sultan. No, the statement is Nigerians must continue to have faith and pray for leaders. You can find details of his statement inside the paper. We have pictures showing survivors being treated in the hospitals. This happened, the bombing in Tudunbiri in Kaduna State. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Well, just as the Sultan is saying that they should pray for Nigeria,
Yes.
and here we are having Khan is saying to help rebuild Nigeria, don't engage in Japa syndrome. And we're seeing our university is crying. ASU is calling for the attention of the president to actually look at some of the deplorable state some of our federal universities are in. And you know, it's really sad, Rachel, if you even look at the way our schools are, and then the fact that we're having our lecturers leaving, we're having our doctors leaving, quite a number of practitioners are actually leaving the shores of Nigeria. Of course, it will look more like, I mean, your father is a drunkard, and then after he tried to send you to school, and then you feel like you're now independent, you want to leave your father because he's a drunkard. That is the situation of Nigeria presently. Yes, a lot of things are not working, and then we are having Khan and other people calling on the fact that do not leave Nigeria. I mean, we need to build the country together. But I think our leaders also have to start by leading by example. I mean, because we cannot keep telling the young ones to stay back, and then our leaders are not doing anything. Your wards are schooling abroad, you receive your medical checkup abroad. Virtually everything you do outside the country. So who do you leave the country for? We keep saying we have no any other country apart from Nigeria, Richard, because no matter where you go, no matter how wealthy you are, you're a second-class citizen there. This is the only place you are a first-class citizen. So we have to put our hands together, and I hope our leaders will realize that it's a matter of time. You will not be on your high horse forever. You will come down to meet these people. So what will you do when you did not put some of this state primary health care properly? What will you do when eventually you benefit from these federal universities, but then you are refusing to fix them? So we are hoping that our leaders will really realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it should not be left to a few individuals. It's a collective work for everybody. Therefore, everybody needs to put the work together. Well, Richard, I think our time is fast spent, and we have to call it a day here. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And thank you to our caller who called on the program this morning. We're truly grateful for your input about the stories. And thank you to our viewers and supporters at home for always keeping it in with us on the program. Until we come here again tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.